Next up, we've got Anne-Marie Douglas. I had a chat with Anne-Marie at the start today because I feel really aligned with her organisation and the work that they do, which is Peer Power Youth. You launched that in 2016, Anne-Marie, and I'll let you come up and tell us how you use transformational power of empathy and personal experience to lead that organisation and to make a positive impact on other people's lives. Thank you.
That's a lot of people. And the time is on 11. Can go on?
You reset the clock.
Thank you.
That's time.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'm super nervous, especially when you stand here and see all of your faces. But also, I keep telling myself, don't be nervous, because these are your people. It's like, you don't need to be worried. So I'm going to try. I'm going to speak from the heart and use these a little bit. I'm prone to ramble. So I kind of wanted to start today with a story about a boy that I met a long time ago in a primary pupil referral unit. And his name was Stephen, and he was 9 years old. And this primary pupil referral unit was in Bradford, where I'm from. And there were only 10 boys in there. And the school should have had about 100 kids, and it was massive. But I mean, no one could cope with the kids and the way they were acting out and their behaviours and needs. And certainly the teachers could not. There was a lot of self-harm. There was a lot of, the kids were running away. They were climbing up high. They were very, very, very violent. But I really had a soft spot for Stephen, and partly because he was just so funny. And anyway, so there would be big kick-offs. And my favourite thing about Stephen and my favourite memory is that he would go on a massive rampage of swearing. And he would use words and swears that a 9-year-old should not know. And right in the middle of it, so he'd be like, oh, and then he'd just be like, girl pants. And then he'd carry on again. And I'd be like, what? You did all that really good swearing and you say girl pants in the middle of it. So I'd be like, dial back, making say it all again. And he's like, what? She's letting me swear. So he'd like very happily go say it all again. And then he'd catch me and my eye realised that I was essentially taking the piss because he'd said girl pants in the middle of it, which was a rubbish swear. And we would connect, and it was always a lovely, lovely moment. And in and amongst all of that, like later on I found out I had ADHD, and I was like, oh, that's where I connected with the kids in there. But so the bit that really, really got me about that place is that, Stephen was right to be angry, and the other kids were right to be angry, because actually they'd been labelled for ages, and they'd been labelled as bad, they'd been excluded loads. Like the youngest kid in there was 5. And they were waiting for statements, and often, you'd see I set up this room with them, dressing up clothes and stuff, and you see them kind of act out like what was going on at home and stuff. So they were going through a lot. And in amongst that, the teachers were not coping, they were not being looked after, they were hurt as well. And there was just this real lack of love and care and empathy in that place. And that was kind of the first moment I really felt it. And most especially in the teacher's staff room, where they said that the kids were evil, they were going to kill someone someday, all of that. And I'm thinking, it's a 9-year-old boy. And that really, really stayed with me for a long time. And I carried on sort of working across youth justice and social services and all of that in Bradford. And I'd sit in these multi-agency meetings and I'd hear the way they talked about families and kids and the power and control that they thought they had over them, and the way they talked. And again, just this massive lack of empathy, and just super uncomfortable, because I'm like, that's my family you're talking about, that's where I come from, but not really having the language for that at that time. In and amongst that, I was going through loads of trauma in my life, lots and lots of sudden grief, lots of very traumatic events were happening, but, we carry on. And I started to work across youth justice services, started to employ people with convictions, and I started to see that when they were connecting with the young people in the justice system, there would be like this really accelerated empathy. Like they just got it in ways the social workers never could, and So I started to get this little bee in my bonnet again about empathy. And then at age 30, a massive, I just call it the big one. So the big one happened, the big massive trauma that like knocked me off my axis completely. And I still don't know. I'm here. Well, I'm going to tell you I'm here today. It was because of a service. So somebody who'd been through a similar thing, I still call my angel. She said, go to this place. It's been designed by people who've been through the same thing. And, it really helped me. And I thought, I do not want to go there. I don't want to make that this happened. I don't want to go through that door. But I did. Got up the courage to go. And every time I went, there would be something different on. There would be, I went to acupuncture. I went to kickboxing. What was it? There was like poetry there. And it didn't matter, like they said to me, like we've designed this for people who've gone through it, so you can come as long as you want, and we know you'll need all these different things at different times. And I remember there was even somebody that helped me write shocking lists, which probably gives you an indication of just a mess that I was in at that point in my life. It really was a lifeline for me, and again, I hated going. I cannot tell stressed me how much I hated going. But afterwards, I realised how transformational it had been in my life. And I realised that this was like a truly empathy-led service. Like nobody else could have got what I needed at those points in that same way. So I started to get really obsessed with empathy then and how it could maybe be a force to transform services. So I got a fellowship, a Churchill fellowship, and I got funded to go to all over America and Canada, research more about empathy, my favourite subject. And I wrote a report on it. And I guess the big learning for me was that empathy is like a muscle. Like the more you use it, the more it grows. And also I kind of looked at where it was lacking in services and realised that like it's not just about empathy, that actually it's a doing word and it's love in action. And that a lot of services were not really talking about empathy or care or love at that time. And I guess like many of us in this room, I felt a real maybe it's the ADHD thing and the sense of justice, but this real compulsion to change the system. So I moved to London, stupid, when I look back, like stupid, I don't know, But anyway, got a little desk in Victoria, got a foreground grant from the School for Social Entrepreneurs, and then I set up Peer Power Youth with a group of young people with empathy and co-production sort of very much in our DNA. So, I forgot my clipboard. Could you go to the next? Okay. And so this is little me. I just to sort of tell you a bit sort of about my background when I was younger. So I always call myself an accidental CEO. Like I never planned to be a CEO. And I grew up in Bradford, and where I come from, if I'd have said that when I was a kid, I would have definitely been punched. And sporting the same haircut, something never changed. So I left school really young, and I had a baby young. I was pretty wild, and was going through all that grief and trauma that it just kept continuing. But actually later on, until my 40s, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD and ADHD, and then everything started to make sense, including, the history at the People Referral Unit as well. And although there's evidently loads of struggles with that, I also realised that my brain's got loads of strengths, and I see patterns and stuff before other people do, and hyper focus. And I think it gave me more push to build peer power, because your people need to see leaders like them, and loads of them have said to me it's so important that you're very, very open about having ADHD and the complex PTSD as a leader. And so I'll tell you a bit about peer power. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So peer power, we work in London and the South East. We've done work in the North before, and my aim is to get back north. But it's a very relational model, and so when we expanded too fast at one point, and we couldn't go to the depth that we'd always needed. Everything about it's been co-produced from the start, so it's a real it's co-production and the system change bit, but it's also individual change. So we do wraparound support for young people, and someone was saying earlier about bank accounts, it's all of the basics of housing, bank accounts, ID, all of that, whatever they need, there's therapy support for them and so on. And then the system change bit, we work with NHS, Youth Justice Board, Ministry of Justice. I'm on a mission to get empathy and love in those services. And we work in Felton Prison, ISIS Prison, and so on. And could you put the next one? And yeah, we've been doing it 10 years. We now started to bottle our DNA. So if anyone wants to talk to me about what we do and how we do it, I'll be around afterwards. And you could just go on to the next one. And yeah, there's this statistic, 92% going education, training or employment. That was never, ever intentional, but young partners have gone on to amazing things afterwards. They've started their own organisations and so on. And when I set Peer Power up, people were really like, what, you're going to set an organisation up on empathy and love? Like, now empathy is talked about in government documents, and people said it was too radical. And one of the things, I've got really sore throat, one of the things that I was really, really committed to was creating an organisation that did the same internally as we were doing externally. So we share power and knowledge internally in the organisation, and I'm really passionate that in a team of lived and learned experience that I and people and our staff teams can learn everything about the charity. Nothing is kept from them other than obviously like, I don't know, GDPR stuff and confidentiality. But they can learn about everything, and we have young people sharing decisions alongside trustees and alongside our staff teams, and that's on every single bit of the charity. And, you know, we're still here 10 years later, so whilst it's radical, and I've definitely gone grey since, and everything takes a really long time to do it that way, you really should, I think, be living what you're doing outside in co-production, inside your organisation. And the other big thing, and it's kind of what I want to close on today, something I'm really, really passionate about, is we've learnt loads about looking after people through doing this lived experience work. And especially if you're, as a lived experience-led organisation, you're having staff teams going into places that have harmed them over and over again. And as small lived experience-led charities, we are really struggling for funding. Lots of us are closing. And we're in this weird time now where there's this, I can't say the word fetishisation, but, there's this obsession with lived experience work, because you've got funders and commissioners saying how many of your board are lived experience, how many of your staff team are, but they're not actually paying us properly to do this work safely and to look after our people. Like, paying people is the bare minimum. What actually we need to be doing is making sure people can rest and recover and not burn out in this work. And I've seen that, and I have to, hands on heart know that we've caused harm sometimes in our work because we were hustling for money to survive. We had too many projects. And then we got to a point where we had to go, no, like we've had to say no to quite a lot of work to protect our staff team's well-being. And that's a really, really hard thing to do in the current climate. And because I was hurt emotionally, sometimes we were causing harm. I went to one of the funders, I went to Esme Fairburn, and I had a very vulnerable conversation. And I said, if we're experiencing this, I bet loads of other lived experience organisations are, but they probably won't tell you as a funder because, of the power dynamic. So they gave me some money, and we set up like just a learning project. I got 40 lived experience-led organisations, totally cross-sector, which was better because everybody could just say how it was. And we were really vulnerable, and we talked about like the joy and the pain of this work and what should be happening and how we are effectively being exploited a lot of the time by funders and commissioners and put in positions where we can't really win. So we created a resource, which I'm happy to share with anybody afterwards. So I can send it to Darren and then we can send it out. But I guess the big, I'm losing my thing right at the end. Oh yeah, I remember it. My big thing is like what I was really going for. And I told Esme this, like what I want is for us all here, and I'm asking you all to do this, is please talk to people more about what is really needed in this work. Because what we were doing is we would go for a bid and you can put 10% on for your core costs or whatever. Well, that's what all the big charities are doing as well. But we were still on top of that, somehow finding money for therapy, time off for rest, all of the well-being stuff that we know we need. And we were going under because of it. And I said to them, it's just not equitable, this. So I said, what I really want is a lived experience levy. So you put your core costs on, but then you ask for more. You ask for all that stuff as well. And I've tried it, and it works as long as you make the case for it. And so that's my I guess, call to action to kind of close my talk, is to please all talk about what we need more, because they need us to do this work, but we have to look after ourselves first in it. And I guess just a final thing about Stephen is I never found out what happened to Stephen, but I do really think about him often, because of his amazing swearing, obviously. But it was just such a lovely lad, and I often wonder what it might have been, how it might have been different for him if he was going through services that would be more empathic and more loving and more caring.
Anybody that knows the work I do with youth is I just hold Anne-Marie, what she's doing with peer power, in absolute the highest regard, and I think that's the way that we should be working with all service users across all sectors, and obviously the practitioners and lived experience practitioners that work in those fields.